Brethren, if you think about it, and I'm sure you all have from time to time, we know that the spring holy day season starts with a bang of sorts. In a sense, we begin with the quiet intensity of the Passover that lays out for us God's plan that existed from the very foundation of the world. And that's told to us. We read that in the Scriptures. Last night we enjoyed the night to be much observed, where we are told to watch. And then we enter into the days of unleavened bread for 7 days of consideration about how mankind's program, their developments, their government, their thought process, their hearts are in the wrong place, and that we need to effectively remove ourselves from that and elevate our expectations and our plans and our performance to God's level, that we know, again, is higher than the ways of man. And in each of these ceremonial events, there's a heightened sense of awareness, of attention to purpose and the future. Last night in preparation for the meal, I read from Exodus chapter 12 and verse 42, where we find reference to the night to be much observed, and how the Lord kept vigil over his people as he prepared them for the Exodus, as he prepared them for a journey forward into a better place, a place of promise from so long ago, out of the land of Egypt. We saw in that verse a reference to watching intently, to keeping ourselves awake in a spiritual sense, to be on guard and to be alert. Vigilance is a major theme of God's holy days. And it's not just on the night to be much observed, although that term is used specifically there. But as we move through the events of God's holy day calendar, we realize that we look to Christ's return. We look to Satan being banished. We look to the kingdom. And so we look and we watch. We become a watchman, effectively, by our intention, by our example. And there is so much of that. Again, we look forward to the special and important events in God's plan of salvation that will ultimately change the course for all of humanity. Today, brethren, I'd like us to consider 3 points or examples of how and why it's so important for us to watch and have that mindset of vigilance. And I've entitled my message, Always Watchful. Point number 1, or example number 1, if you will. Again, as we start preparing, as we read particular passages, for those of you that speak, you know that sometimes the inspiration comes, there's just a word that suddenly it's like, and things begin to tie together. A flood of verses and thoughts and examples and experiences come to your mind. And that's much of what happened as I began this particular message. So point number 1. One of my favorite, or example number 1, if you will, because they're all related to the watching and the concept of vigilance. One of my favorite literary characters has a saying, "Don't see, look. Don't hear, listen." His point is that too many people get in trouble because they don't live their lives intentionally. They don't live their lives with focus. They don't pay attention to what's going on around them. They find themselves in trouble because they don't focus on the details that are available to them because they don't look. They see, oh, I hear something, but do you listen for the detail? Do you live intentionally? Now, this character is the quintessential tough guy. He's big, he's strong, he comes with a military background, and so he's been trained to look for snipers in the trees and bad guys in back alleys. But his argument would be that sometimes accidents happen, but far less often to those that are alert, those that are prepared, those that are watching and listening intently. Our Bibles tell us exactly that in Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 3. You don't need to turn there, you can just write it down as reference, because it says that a prudent man or a wise man or a prepared man or woman foresees evil and hides himself. That focused and discerning person sees a problem and makes a plan. They take action. They prepare to evaluate what the consideration and risks might be, and then they take plans and actions in order to prevent or minimize those risks to them and their loved ones and their surroundings. But they're intent. They're prepared. They're alert. They pay attention. They see what's coming. Thomas Jefferson is credited with having said that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and that certainly rings true today. Vigilance, brethren, is not an event. It's a mindset. It's a way of life. And like faithfulness, it's something that we need to be doing, actively doing, each and every day of our lives. We read in God's Word that Jesus Christ has already won the most important battle over Satan. But since Satan is still at large, because he hasn't yet been banished, we need to remain vigilant, always, until he is disposed of at the return of Jesus Christ. So, brethren, let's not just see. Let's intentionally look at what's going on around us so that we might avoid the troubles that come to those who are less alert. That's true in a physical sense if you're driving. That's certainly true in a spiritual sense when we realize what the world around us is doing and trying to drag us into. Point number two, or example number 2, about watching always. In point number 1, I spoke of a favorite literary character, and now I turn to one of my favorite television shows. I love the outdoors, most of you know that. And Ultimate Survival Alaska focuses on teams of survivalist men and women who are dropped off in the wilderness where they compete with each other in various wilderness races. They're long distance, they might be 20, 30, 40 miles that this team has to manage. The scenery is breathtaking and the physical challenge that they endure are intense. Having done the Mutter and other things like that, I appreciate pushing yourself and just what it takes sometimes to get through the beauty and yet the challenge of God's creation. These teams are dropped off by aircraft and then they compete in races through Alaska's unpredictable weather, barren landscapes, and sometimes hostile predators. Now, brethren, these experienced teams, they have different areas of expertise. They may be woodsmen or mountaineers or military or endurance experts. But each team has the task of reaching an extraction point. They have 60 hours to travel all this distance. And whatever they face, they've got to figure out, do I want to take the high road or the low road? What are my barriers going to be? And each one draws on specific experiences. But the idea is that they have to go through some tough things, and they have to be prepared, alert, watchful, planning, very thoughtful people. One recent episode saw the teams dropped off on the south side of Kodiak Island, which is the most densely populated grizzly bear population on the planet. And they had to travel 30 miles on feet in 60 hours, avoiding the bears, sleeping overnight, making their own food. And so at the end of the first day, they'd come around the corners, and of course they got a video crew behind them, but they'd come around the corner, there's suddenly a mother with her 3 cubs, and so suddenly they're backing off, and that's what their whole trip was like. So you can imagine at the end of the first day, they were tired, they were wet, they were hungry, and they were scared out of their drawers. And now it's time to make camp. And what every team recognized is we need to post a watch. Because our ability to be prepared and attentive to what's going on around us literally could be the difference between life and death. Brethren, we need to do that same type of thing. They remain vigilant, and Peter warns us in 1 Peter 5 and verse 8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Now, brethren, we may not be marching through bear and lion-infested terrain, but still we need to, when we take the physical explanation there and turn it into the spiritual concept, we need to be watchful, because sometimes our physical survival, as in the driving situation, or certainly our spiritual salvation, depends on it. Point number 3. Another situation, another example where somebody watches intently for something to happen in expectations would be those that camp out to catch a glimpse of a celebrity, or those that want to be the first one in the store for deals on Black Friday, or who wait for the newest technology out in front of the Apple store. It's not a new phenomenon, whether you follow the Beatles or Elvis Presley, or now you go to a golf tournament and you watch literally hundreds and sometimes thousands of people crowd around a particular place to get a glimpse of, or maybe the autograph of a Tiger Woods. Or again, you watch people camp out for days on the sidewalk in front of the Apple store to get the latest technology as it comes out. These people choose and then patiently endure some degree of hardship for a perceived reward. Now, I'm not recommending that we huddle with the masses on the sidewalk on some store next Thanksgiving evening. It's always seemed a bit silly to me. But in a similar way, are we prepared? Are we watching? Are we enduring so that we can receive our reward, that promise of eternal life? A biblical example for this particular point would be the parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew chapter 25. In Matthew chapter 25 and verse 1, it says, "Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to the 10 virgins who took their lamps, and they went out to meet the bridegroom." That was their celebrity. That's the person they wanted so badly to see. They planned, they watched, and they endured for this anticipated reward. But if we drop to verse 10, it says, and we know that there were 5 that came better prepared and 5 that didn't, and they ran out of oil, and so they're like, I want to be here, but I need to get something, and things developed as they left. So verse 10 says, "And while they, the 5 foolish, were less prepared, went to buy more oil for their lamps, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut." The passage shows that those who were best prepared, those who had planned, those who had deeper reserves and were watching, were successful in their efforts. Brethren, Christians of every generation have anxiously awaited Christ's triumphant return as our King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Countless speculations have been made regarding what that date would be. And yet God says, you're wasting your time, because I know mankind's heart, and if you can calculate the date, you'll be lazy between now and then. Therefore, we're told to watch always, to pray, to be vigilant, to be diligent in our efforts. We want to remain vigilant and alert because we cannot know the exact time of his return. In the book of Luke chapter 12, it says, "Let your waist be girded and your lamps burning," hearkening back to the 10 virgins, "and you yourselves be like the men who wait for their master, that when he comes and knocks, they may open to him immediately." They're prepared, they're watching, they're listening, they're waiting for that knock. "Blessed are those servants whom the master, when he comes, shall find watching." This week, brethren, we will watch out for donuts and pizza and Girl Scout cookies. But it's important for us to think not so much of events, as in the night, to be much observed, as in the days of unleavened bread. But when it comes to the sense of watching, we need to be eternally vigilant, brethren, to the ways of this world that might ensnare us. To consider next week, and next month, and next year, and the day that Christ returns. Will we be watching? Will we be found as those blessed servants who are watching when that time comes? The references we've read today and the examples I've given should show us a spiritual condition of alertness and intensity and intentionality, a decision we make, a commitment that we make. This is our time to be on guard and to take our position as the watchman. The instruction from each verse that we've read today remains focused and attentive, not falling prey to the world and its distractions. Brethren, we've all seen movies or television shows where a small troop of soldiers is moving cautiously toward a target destination. They remain on high alert. They're watching out for those that might attack, or booby traps snares that may have been laid for them as they make their way forward. They watch ahead, they watch their flanks, they've got somebody walking backwards to make sure they're watching for attack from behind. They maintain elevated focus, weapons at the ready. Again, those night vision goggles, equipment that helps them to be better prepared, to improve their vision, to be aware of what's going around them and better ready for things that may pop up. Being alert, brethren, and vigilant are vital characteristics for Christians in our day and age, just as they have been down through time. We're told to watch and to pray always, aware that our salvation is nearer each and every day. So, brethren, let's not just casually see. Let's intentionally look. Keep watching. Keep watching.